Welcome to Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. If you remember back a few episodes, I was in Kansas consulting with a fellow there. And this week I'm going to spend some time in southern Indiana with Jordan Hawkins. And Jordan's got a really beautiful property here. Our goal after the next 24 hours is to figure out how Jordan can hold more mature bucks on this property. And it was kind of comical when we were going over his goals, and that's the one he came up with. And I got to thinking, that's probably the same goal that every single person that I'm ever going to meet with is going to have. It's easy enough to kill them if they're there, and we've talked about that quite a bit. So over the course of the next 10 to 15 minutes or so here on the episode, maybe a little bit longer, we're going to work our way through Jordan's property and hopefully come up with a few ideas for him and things that he can do to hold more bucks. And usually that comes back to the same things. It's habitat, food, to a lesser extent how you hunt them. If the deer are comfortable there, they're more relaxed and they're going to stay. So the hunting pressure does have an impact, but even more important than that is just the environment that you create, the food and the habitat. So we'll take a look around, and we do have a pretty good start on this because you said you took a commercial harvest in the timber recently. Was that last year?
Yeah, in the middle of 21 through the end of the year, first of 22, it finished up. So yeah, it took about 6 months.
Yeah, so that's kind of a starting point because we're always looking to open up the canopy and to get sunlight in so there's more browse for the deer. And that's got some other really practical applications too, with making the property hunt easier because the deer can't see you, when you're coming and going. Also, I feel like, and we talked about it on the consult in Kansas, is the thicker the cover is, the more that the bucks will accept each other because they're not interacting quite as much. So, some of the reason that you don't have a lot of mature bucks in some places is the bucks are just, they're running each other off.
Yeah.
There's so much competition, and so we'll take a look, but looking forward to it, and should be a lot of fun. Okay, so we stopped at the first location here, and this is kind of a best case scenario really, because we talked about the fact that Jordan had this logged, and that's perfect because then he has the opportunity to watch it for a year or two and see how the habitat responds. And in some cases he's not going to have to do any TSI work at all, but there'll be some areas where he just didn't get enough opening of the canopy in order to get sunlight to the ground with the logging operation. So you got to come back into those same areas again, and we'll show you this one. So if you're thinking, I want to do some work on my habitat, first step is definitely, if there's a possibility for commercial logging, do that first. And then you can always come back and do the TSI work later. That's definitely the steps, the order of operation. So we'll keep looking, but I just wanted to show you this spot right away because that does solve a lot of problems when you open it up, and it does create some income.
Yeah.
So that's not all bad either, because then you can afford to hire people like me. So we've walked down in here a little bit, and Jordan said that the forester that helped him with the cut suggested that he cut even more down to open it up even more. Mm-hmm. And what was his main logic for that?
He wanted total clear cut for the hardwood regeneration, because the canopy was just consumed by a lot of beech and a lot of sycamore. So when he came in, he's like, I want everything in this area down. We haven't done that yet. We haven't done any TSI work specific to that yet. Yeah. That's to come, but we have a lot of little areas like this that have non-desirable trees that are, as far as timber market goes. So
I think in most settings, this is a good starting point, like year one, because I don't like it for guys to cut it too hard right away.
Yeah.
Because you can't put them back, you know, and we keep having that same point come up. I would rather have people, when they start a timber cutting program, whether it's commercial or TSI, the commercial is going to make more sense because there's only certain trees that they want.
Yeah.
But when you go into a TSI program, I don't like it when they cut it really aggressively right away, because it's nicer to cut it, you know, moderate, see how the habitat reacts to it, see what comes in. You can always come back and cut more.
Yeah.
Like so if I was just giving a straight consultation on this piece, I'd say you've opened up enough. Let's see what happens, and then, you know, I would give you maybe like the criteria of what to look for to make the decision to cut more or not. You know, versus some of that, you know, and I get it with the forester. Some of them have, you know, a really, really hardcore oak regeneration agenda. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you got to have direct sunlight in order to regenerate oak. But this spot doesn't look bad to me. You know, I'd be proud of stuff like this on my farm. So anyway, it's just kind of a first step maybe, but a good first step. We're at another spot a little bit further down the hill, and this is an area where there's a bunch of beech, big mature giant trunked beech trees, and some of these are probably, gosh, 30 inches in diameter. They've got to go somehow, and Jordan thinks there's maybe a local market for it, but either way, now we're into a spot where if you compared this to where we started, where there was a fair amount of open canopy, there's not very much open canopy here, so you're not going to get that succession. You're not going to get the desirable browse species that the deer are going to be you know, feeding on and really benefiting from. Plus there's an awful lot of these little small beech trees, you know, kind of as you look around, little ones that they're very shade tolerant apparently. I haven't had a lot of experience with beech. We've got something very similar called ironwood that doesn't mature into the same, you know, same size of a tree, but it's very shade tolerant and you know, a useless tree for the wildlife as well. So you know, we're on to the second spot, and you know, maybe a little bit extra work here, maybe another timber cut. That's just in general, if you're not getting open canopy, like if sunlight can't get in, you don't need it everywhere, but you want to at least have pockets, you know, where there's a lot of sunlight getting in. Here's maybe, looking at it right here, probably 20 plus acres just in view, 15 plus acres where there's not a whole lot of sunlight getting in. So that would be one that a guy would have to look at a little bit more aggressively. Yeah. So we stopped here. I wanted to show you a spot that has about 1.5 years, about 1.5 growing seasons from when they cut this. Jordan said that they cut this maybe June, July of 2021. So here we are in January of 23. So it would have had part of 21 to grow, and then all of 22. And it's pretty thick. It looks pretty good. This is a spot that for sure you wouldn't do any more with. The canopy is open enough here. There are a few spots, like we talked, that are still a little bit too enclosed. But I thought you'd get a kick out of what this can look like when you really open it up just 1.5 years later.
The gate's just down there. We can see it right there. See the sign?
Yeah. So that's the property line?
That's the property line.
So Jordan and I are standing in a spot now that's, historically it's been one of his best spots on the farm. He said the deer moved through here, and after the timber operation, they opened up partially this little area, trying to make, I mean, I call them like staging area food plots or kill plots. And the whole idea is to get the deer shortly after they leave their bedding areas in the evenings, or shortly before they go into bed in the mornings, before they go out into the bigger ag fields, before they make their rounds. And Ethan's going to put the drone up so you'll be able to see this a little bit better. But the way this sets up, there's a house above it that it's not where Jordan lives, but it's a house on the property, and that's kind of deters the deer from going in that direction. So as they work through here, you kind of predictably know which direction that they're going. So it's really a bulletproof spot to hunt, because there's an easy entry and exit where you're not going to run into the deer.
Yeah, we traditionally get in and out, and we can hunt it multiple times, and you can tell it's not been boogered up.
Yeah.
So it's an ideal spot for us to hunt, and we would kind of like to get it to a spot that, like it was before we timbered it, but obviously better with, like you said, like a staging plot or a kill plot.
Yeah, and that's, I love those. I mean, anytime I'm looking at these properties, I'm trying to figure out where to create those. And we haven't gone very far yet, so this is really the first one we've come upon, and he's already started it anyway. But on the farm that I sold, I think I had 11 or 12 of those, and they averaged anywhere from about maybe a little more than 1/4 of an acre up to about an acre. And I was fine with about 1/2 an acre as a really nice general size. And this one is probably, if you push out what makes sense, is probably about 1/2 an acre.
Yeah.
We talked about what to do with the roots, because he's got access to a bulldozer. It's gonna be easy enough to knock down some of these trees, but the ones that are the stumps that are already there from the logging, that's going to be the trick.
Yeah.
It's either you have to kind of farm around those, or you probably would have to grind them out.
Yeah, and as few as there are, we think we can get them out.
But so anyway, the point being, these kind of spots are things to look for. Any place you can create a little green opening that's inside the timber, not too far from bedding areas, is going to be a prime spot for catching those deer on their feet during daylight. We're at another one of the spots that on Jordan's farm sets up really well for one of these staging area food plots. In fact, this is actually better. The one that we were at before, you'd have to work pretty hard to make that, you know, a suitable spot, because it was so steep compared to this. This is a flat point, and if you go out on the ends, you're going to get the bedding, but the flat part up on top, the main flat part on this point, you could have into food. So there's probably at least 1/2 an acre behind us on this top, and then you're just short of a spot behind us that's going to be an ag field and potentially a food plot where you've left some corn standing back there. So I mean, this is really almost like the perfect spot for trapping a buck to kill it with a bow. You know, it's, you know, you could sit on, there's a gas line that we drove up through. I probably should have filmed that, but you can sit on that with a well, you can't hunt 270s here, can you?
Yeah.
Oh, you can. Well, you can sit on there with a 270 and you can shoot anything that crosses it.
Yeah.
But it's tough to bow hunt those kind of spots.
Yeah.
But this kind of spot right here, you create that close range encounter, because you could keep this plot fairly small, and it's going to funnel back toward the ag field. So the deer pop out of their bed, out on any of these, you know, the ends of this point, and they work their way up past you, heading out to feed. So you don't want to have your stand or your blind in here. You want it way back where they exit this plot and go out into the main ag field. Yeah. But yeah, this is the kind of the recipe of just a killer setup. It's a lot of stumps. You're going to be working. You're going to be working back here. But this is, I like this really well, to be honest with you. This is about as cool a spot as what we've looked at. There was one more closer to that other house, right behind it, that made sense, but this one's even bigger yet. White's Bowhunting Whitetails is brought to you by Day 6 Arrows, Redneck Blinds, Code of Silence Apparel, Fuse Archery, and Hoyt. So it's day 2 on Jordan's farm, and we were sitting in the truck for a little while talking about some of the things that we had learned yesterday. We got together last night with Jordan and some of the guys that hunt here and some of his buddies, and we talked about what the history of this place has been, the kind of deer that they're seeing, how many of the different you know, sexes of the deer, bucks versus does, a lot of background information that would help us make some decisions about what to do in order to hold more mature bucks on this property. And you know, some of the pieces didn't quite line up right, so I think there's maybe more bucks getting sifted off the boundaries by other hunters maybe than these guys know, because he was feeling like the buck to doe ratio is about 5 or 6 does per buck. And You know, if they're only killing a couple bucks a year here, then that ratio should be a lot closer to 1-to-1. You know, nature would like a 1-to-1, but there's so much, buck mortality compared to doe mortality because the bucks roam and get run over and they fight and kill each other. And so you're never going to get 1-to-1, but you should have 1.5 does per buck if you don't kill anything. And so anyway, what we kind of came back to was maybe they need to begin shooting a few more does and just try to bring that ratio closer to 1-to-1 and see what effect that has. I don't think they have an overcrowding issue here. That was one of the things that kind of jumped into my mind. It's like, well, you know, if the bucks are fringing out because there's too many deer, that would explain, you know, why they're maybe not holding or seeing as many mature bucks. The other thing is there's a lot of habitat here. You know, it's you know, if a buck reaches 6 years old and he's got a 30-acre range, there's an awful lot of 30 acres back in here. So there might be a few that are slipping through the net when they're, you know, trying to find them back. But that's kind of where it led us, was, you know, the stuff that we do all the time. Make the habitat better, so the bucks aren't interacting as much. You know, give them some room where you don't have that, you know, hyper dominant buck that maybe doesn't have the greatest genetics, that's moving the other bucks away from that area. And that might be an issue here too. I mean, we didn't really get deep enough into that, but there's always a 6-year-old buck here that nobody wants to shoot. Everywhere it seems like there's deer like that. And the most dominant bucks aren't always the ones with the best antlers. Sometimes and always, they're the ones with the worst attitude, often the biggest body, but the antler doesn't really come into play when it comes to sorting out dominance. It's a non-factor to the deer. We assume that big antlered bucks are dominant, but that's not really how it works. So that might be an issue here too, because I doubt there's been very many what some programs would call management bucks being shot. You know, if you see a 130-inch 8-pointer that's 6 years old, he's probably not getting
No, he's not getting shot.
No, because it's a 1-buck state.
Yes. Yeah. Choose wisely.
Yeah. So it's a tough one. You got to bring in somebody during a gun season and try to get that deer. And
that's why I have 4 kids.
Those kids can be.
Broden doesn't care.
No, kids love it.
Yeah.
And usually there's other people too you can find, but that's a huge challenge when you're managing a larger property like this. Is, you know, how do we kill enough of the right bucks? You know, not just the trophy bucks, but those I call them bullies, those older age class bucks with the smaller antlers that nobody really wants to shoot. So that might come into play here as well. But what we're going to transition into today is just a more of a focus on what to do with these 180 acres of open ground. And he's got a farmer that he likes, he wants to keep. There's a little bit of a conflict when you take 180 acres of open ground basically in the middle of the property. You have what I would call the perfect rifle hunting farm. But these guys want to, you know, be primarily bow hunters, and they are primarily bow hunters. So how do you take a farm with 180 acres of ag in the middle and optimize that for bow hunting and create those close range encounters? It's a topic that we've talked about a lot, just here and there along the way, but you don't want to bow hunt out of rifle stands. So all this stuff on the edge, they're rifle stands. Mm-hmm. So you got to create those more close range, intimate spots where the deer are going to present you with the 30-yard shots, where you don't have to dive down into the timber to do it. And even at that, you're looking at 400 acres of timber. You know, there's going to be a few just obvious spots, but there's a lot of spots even in there where the deer are going to be passing 100 yards away. So just trying to trick the farm out from the standpoint of making it really bow hunter friendly almost requires revamping the open ground. But that brings us back to the farmer. So
slowly.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things we're going to look at now is, let's just take each of these fingers that runs back into the timber and stay away from the big open flats and the spots where the dirt is good. And let's pick those spots where, you know, it's the terrain starts dropping off, the soil quality disappears, you got a lot of edge, you get back in those ends of these points. Those are perfect places to create really prime bow hunting opportunities, because usually you got a bedding area, you know, out past that, the end of that point. Well, the deer are coming out to that spot right away anyway. So that's kind of what we're going to do next. So, you know, without further ado, we're going to jump on the side-by-side and cruise around. Broden, he's here. He's got an idea, I think, of where's that BB gun? There it is. We all had one of these. Don't shoot your eye out.
He probably has never watched that movie.
Okay, so now we're just out for a little walk back on one of these points, and I'm going to hand Jordan my coffee cup because I can't go far without that. But let's just do yeah, I don't trust him. He's going to have half of it gone. So let's just do a quick pan here, and you can see what we're working with. And I think Ethan probably has the drone video from yesterday for this too. But if you look out, you can see 2 points here, one straight away from us, and then one that cuts off to the left. And this is tailor-made, you know, for, you know, some kind of a line here. And just, you could either just farm it for the, you know, the food plot part, or I mean, I think I personally would put this into a program back here. You know, I think I'd cut it off there because there's still going to be enough, you know, where you've got just going down the top and planting the food. You're still going to have 6-7 acres back here.
I think there's right around 12 or 15 total acres.
Yeah. So let's say you put the sides, the steeper edges into, I like the CP3A, which is one of the CRP contracts, and that's, you can get a 15-year enrollment and plant hardwood trees into your CRP ground. So, you know, you got, maybe after 15 years, you may not be able to re-enroll it, who knows, but probably the program turns over again and away you go. But if not, you got a 15-year head start on creating permanent habitat, you know, on the edges of this, where you got those transitional areas where you've got maybe your hard edge now, you just soften that, you know, with your, bringing your timber out from that, and it just makes it so much more comfortable for the deer to step into these open areas. And I mean, that's what I would probably do back here. And you can see there's enough level top that you could get some really nice food plots back in here on top. So I wouldn't put the whole thing in for sure, but being able to put those sides in, you don't really want to farm the poorer soil or even food plot the poorer soil if you can help it. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So you go out on the ends of these points and you got bedding. The first place that those deer are going to come to when they leave those bedding areas is going to be these little isolated bow hunter friendly food plots that you put back on the ends of these points. So we can go back and look at those and kind of see what that shape would look like. We're back on a bedding point, ducking BBs. Get a little PTSD after this consulting trip with Broden up there shooting at his birds. But
conveniently BB's flying overhead. I don't know what he's shooting at.
But anyway, we found a couple of old beds here, and it'll be really interesting to see how the deer will change their bedding locations when this starts to thicken up. Because everybody thinks, oh, they want to live right where it's super thick. Well, that's not really true. They like to see, you know, when they're bedded. They like to bed high, look into the valley, play the wind at their back. They can see what's ever downwind. So they probably aren't going to bed right in those thickest spots. What typically they'll do is bed right on the edge of them. So like right here, we're looking at more of an open spot, and there's 3 or 4 beds right here. So you don't necessarily want to make every point like so thick that you can't walk through it, because the deer aren't going to use it nearly as much as you think. They do like to have some open spots where they can look down. Just makes them feel more comfortable. We're nearing the end of the visit, and we're right back to where we started yesterday. But we've covered a lot of ground, literally and figuratively. This would be, we think, spot number 7. So having 7 options is pretty nice, because again, I've talked about it over and over, and it's probably one of the key features of any really good whitetail property is having the ability to make these small locations where you can bow hunt the deer. And this is another one of those spots where we're standing, and probably the last one on the farm that makes sense. And Jordan thinks he can get probably a half acre out of this with the bulldozer knocking down some trees and opening this up. It's a flat. Beyond the flat is the bedding point. Behind me, behind us, is the open ag field. So they're going to stop in here on their way out. They come out of their beds, they stage here, then they move on through. And there's a lane that they have to cross before they go out into the open ag, and it's a super easy spot where he could have his electric bike just laying there. You know, walk 15, 20 yards, get into the tree or the blind, hunt this, at the end of legal shooting time, go back, jump on that bike and buzz right out of there. And, you know, very easy one to hunt without putting a lot of pressure on the deer. So, you know, as we've circled all around, I think we're about done with the most challenging part of the consultation. That's just trying to figure out, you know, like the overall big picture, and you know, creating more of these spots obviously is a goal. The habitat work that they've already done through the commercial harvest is huge. But the other thing we're noticing too is that there's probably a food shortage here, at least during the hunting season. You know, during the summer maybe not, but you know, there's some food on the neighbors maybe that's excuse me, that's drawing deer, and Jordan has to compete more aggressively, I think, with food.
Yeah.
Because your farmer has gotten very efficient at cleaning the place up.
Yeah, traditionally we had food through the end of the year, and now more traditional farming, we're, you know, middle of September, 1st of October, it'll be out of here.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way to replace that.
Yeah.
Through November.
Right, and the trick is going to be some of the spots we talked about where you could put food plots on the ridge tops, and then you know, plant, you know, a little bit more of like the tree plantings on the side hills where it's steep. Get some government payments to help compensate or offset the fact that you're not farming it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and you create the habitat and the food in some of the other parts of the farm where otherwise it would just be, you know, like this year it's more or less barren.
Yeah.
Combined the beans, then they ran like a vertical tillage through it and basically turned it into dirt. And then there's just no food.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what we do, and that's kind of what we've come up with here. And there's a lot of fine tuning. You know, Jordan and I have talked about that. Is, you know, we're just kind of making the big picture view on this, and there's a lot of adjustments and fine tuning and tweaking that Jordan will do in each of these spots. You know, once he gets them started and created, you know, it's like, how exactly do I get to it? You know, where do I put my blind or my stand? Just the little stuff that's like takes a spot from being good to being great, and that takes a few years.
Yeah.
You know, so it's an evolution. You know, you have a starting point, hopefully, you know, with the stuff we talked about. Then I'll be curious to know, you know, all the things that you learn along the way too. Because even my farm there in Iowa, it's like, you know, we made a bunch of mistakes, but we're just getting started. And there's going to be mistakes before you get it right. But
we'll make a few.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed it. And you know, hopefully, you know, that we can stay in contact on this, and you can, you know, keep me in the loop on how things are going. But it's a lot of potential. There's big deer in the area. It's just a matter of fine tuning this farm so that it carries at least its share, if not more, you know, of the potential that the overall neighborhood has to offer. So
yeah, we're trying to put ourselves in a position to, you know, for more opportunities. You know, and you've said it 1,000 times. You know, you have to have them here first.
Yeah.
And you know, and then it's hunting them. So
yeah,
that's what we're trying to get to is getting more of them here.
No, and this will make a big difference. So anyway, let me shake your hand and say, well, I appreciate it. And
it's been fantastic.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we appreciate you joining us this week on Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. We'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode. And you're going to have to help me with this.
I know it.
He knows it. Remember,
always dream big.
That's right.